Alright, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to finally look at this. Remo from Back to Warcraft 3 weeks ago published the State of Warcraft 3 Balance 2022. This is especially relevant right now because, well, Blizzard is kind of back in the building. Kind of, maybe, probably. You may have seen some recent videos, right? Where we see that the CEO of Blizzard has replied on Twitter saying that we will hear Reforged news in June. Well, it's the 1st of June right now. You see that in the top right over the subgoal? It's the 1st of June. So we could hear from them in a minute or in 30 days. Or who knows, exactly 2 years from now, in the year 2024 of June. They psyched us out by not putting the year in. Anyway, 3 weeks ago, there was a video by Remo, and if you want to watch his direct thoughts on that, I'm going to put the link in the description and in the chat as well. It's a little lengthy, but it's also because probably this cannot be spoken about in a very short manner. There's a 2-hour video here, you can check it out. Should be interesting, and make sure to always give a sub to content that you like. Now, the State of Warcraft, let's look at this. So, going into this, I'm thinking, okay, Warcraft 3 right now, is it in a perfect state of balance? I wouldn't say so, but I think the opinions vary a lot, and we also have the challenge of, well, not really knowing how to evaluate the top level exactly. Is the top level everyone minus Happy and Lynn? Or should we include them? Are they aberrations? Are they special? Do they break the rules of balance? Also, if anyone loses to Happy, is that a sign that Undead is strong, or is he just insane? So, first of all, let's begin with talking about the exception, the outlier here. Happy, I can't analyze his personality, character, and talent set in life too much. I'm not a psychologist, but it seems to me that he is someone that is very good at staying extremely concentrated, focused, and motivated on trying to be the best player that he can be. And I admire it greatly because I myself, when I'm let's say doing well or playing against a player that is a little weaker, I find it very common to lapse in concentration and performance. When I'm playing someone stronger, I try to do better. But especially in the longer term, if I play against strong players repeatedly, that's what makes me get better as I try to, just push myself. The funny thing about Happy is when he plays against weaker players, he could be playing against my 3-year-old nephew and he would still play exactly as good as he could be when he's playing against Lynn. I think he's a very special example, and I would actually be hesitant to put almost anyone on the same footing with him when evaluating balance. Therefore, I would find it reasonable possibly to leave him out of the equation when evaluating balance. I have felt before when losing to Happy that Undead is actually not that weak. For most of my life, Orc has had an advantage against Undead. And that may still be true, or it may not be true anymore. But to ever use any of my losses against Happy as an example that Undead is imba, I think if I've ever done that, and I know I have done that, I think it's mostly an emotional reaction. Because when I look at it statistically, how he's winning like all the games, including in Mirror, mostly, it's really hard to say that it was ever about balance. Statistically, we've got so few outliers. There's Lynn for Orc, Focus sometimes, Fly. There's Happy and 120 for Undead. There's Moon and Lawliet for Night Elf and Foggy. And then for Human, there's like Chamiko and Sok, but they're like notably lower than all the others. But they're also notably newer for the most part, outside of Lawliet, I guess, when it comes to competing at high level. Some of the best performing humans, including Sky and Infi and TH, they're not playing anymore. And either it's because they got tired of the human playstyle, their priorities in life changed, or because they think human is weak, or, it can be all kinds of things. And funnily enough, if a pro player does very well with a race, let's say that Orc is the best race, right? And then the best Orc player in the world, let's say that's Zerkard, right? The best player in the world gets the most famous and gets the best deals to start streaming and doing merchandise. And then he quits competitive gaming because he's the most successful because Orc was the strongest and he was the strongest Orc. then in that case, you'll have one fewer top orc player, but not because the orc was weak, but because it was strong. So evaluating why people quit, I find it very difficult to say that someone quit because the race was weak. Like for instance, TH Infi, they may say that they quit because human is weak, but maybe they quit because they are now successful streamers. You know, they stream now. They prioritize streaming over pro gaming, and they got famous because they won a lot of shit in the years 2007 to 2010. Why did they win a lot? Oh, I think they're very talented and very intelligent, and I think they worked hard at it. But it could also be because human was so strong in those years that they are then able to successfully retire into streaming. And it could be true for me too. It could be true for anyone. So, and I'm not saying it is true, but it is a possibility that people quit for all kinds of different reasons from competitive gaming. And we can't assume it's because the race is strong or because it is weak. Having said that, there seem to be a few outliers in players that, and the fact is we have very few super top players. So statistics at tournament play are difficult to be used to correctly attenuate balance. What we can also do is to look at the game not just from a balance strength perspective, assuming either the community is going to do their own patches or Blizzard comes back to do patches. We don't just look at it from a strength perspective, but we look at it from design, fun, repetitiveness aspects. Is this race too repetitive, yes or no? Is this race fun enough, yes or no? Is it equal parts accessible and viable at the top level? Accessible for newbies and viable at the top level, as the other races? Is there anything that can be done to improve these without skewing balance too much? And finally, and I think this is the most important part for balance, is balance going to be a continuous iterative process, or do we have just one shot to make the best damn balance patch ever? And I think the latter, the best damn balance patch ever, I think that is naive. I think eventually every patch grows stale, and there will always seeming to be one race that is stronger than others. It will seem to be. And whether that's true in the truth of things, whether, you know, if God could say the true truth to us, and it's like, actually, Night Elf is the best. Like, oh, okay, well, now we finally know. Then the question is, can humans reach the maximum level out of Night Elf and actually make it the best? And God is like, lol, no, it just is. I know this because I've seen through the Matrix, but actually humans can never reach that level. It's like, lol. It's like, oh, that's not very useful to us then, right? So what's only useful to us is the practicality. What do we seem to perceive at the top level? Are all races kind of winning things? Or does Back to Warcraft constantly have to cast only human winning things? So having said that, I think it's naive to have one iterative process that finally reaches a single conclusion, says this is the balance that you'll forever deal with. Much better has always been new balance every 9 months, every 6 months, every 9 months, or even every 16 months or 18 months, so that there can be a new breath of air and people are forced to reinvestigate opinions that they have long held. So I'm not too interested about getting it perfect. I want to get all races to be fun and for certain frustrating mechanics to remain because they're fun to use. Other frustrating mechanics to be removed because they're neither fun to use nor to play against. All right, let's jump into it. I'm not going to read out everything because my voice won't survive. I'll have a link to this as well. I want to go into the matter. So Remo says Night Elf Orc is a problematic matchup. If you do a perfect early game with grunts, slowing down the keeper's creeping and ensuring that they don't miss an aggressive AP, the matchup can turn out fair, but it's almost never the case. With the strength of the keeper, with Huntresses and Ultravision, yeah, and I think this is true. Ultravision is a vision advantage, and orcs have to play very perfect. So, again, I can't just look at stats of top level play. For me, I'm going to be speaking from my experience and my feelings. So it is not a scientific process, and it literally cannot be a scientific process, okay? So my feeling is that as a Night Elf against Orc, I can make many mistakes and be fine. But as an Orc, if I make mistakes, I'm dead. And I think you need to have like Hitman level of timing awareness to know where you need to be all the time. And I don't find it interesting from a design perspective to play Orc anymore. against Night Elf. Like, I'm actually not enjoying the matchup at all anymore. Even when I'm doing well, I only know it's because they messed up and they didn't do some of the most abusive mechanics. And yeah, I'm just like better than them, or they made mistakes. And I don't enjoy the matchup anymore. I did enjoy the matchup when it was Talons. I still feel like Talons had an advantage against Orc. There was only 3 to 4 Orcs that could win against Night Elf. Me, Lin, Focus, and Fly. And Focus usually tried to cheese with towers and demolishers and stuff, and Tinker and Naga was weird. Lin had like insane harass awareness. I tried to play late game with high level heroes and base trades and so on. And then Fly is like an amazing battler. And that's how the 4 of us try to win our games. And but there was many elves that could beat orcs. Many top elves. Yeah, like Shy, Soccer, Moon, Remind, Soldier. There were so many elves that could beat orcs, but there was only 4 orcs that could beat elf. But it was more fun, at least. The process of building up the game was more fun back then. And it's not so fun anymore into Mass Hunt. So I would want to address the Keeper Hunter's Ultra Vision meta. Let's see what Remo does. Night Elf power in the early game must be reduced slightly to ensure games have a better chance of moving forwards towards a fair mid-game. Back when it was starting to look like orcs were beginning to be favored in a matchup, as a response to this, XP granted from wards was increased. Short anomaly, orcs are indeed not favored, so it made it worse, should be reverted. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on this. To revert this, I think this kind of stuff, you can always do it. You can always do little attenuations and changes to nerf things and to buff things numerically. I'm looking mostly at big design changes now. You know, in fact, I've forgotten most of the contents of my own patch, so I could be doing this about my own patch as well. But make Ultra Vision require Tree of Ages. I think that's a possibility. The vision thing definitely plays a big part of the early game. This is a pretty good solution, I think. Reduce the experience of Serpent Wards. I find this an unimportant, irrelevant change. I mean, it could be this, it could be +1 agility to blades, it could be +50 health or 1 damage to grunt. All these things are going to be like little things that move the needle a bit, but don't change the actual design of the matchup. I don't want to have stronger Serpent Wards or less punishing Serpent Wards. I want to make sure that early game feels like a fun game of chess where both players... Chess maybe is a bad example. A fun game where both players can make play and counterplay that is defined by skill and not some binary, they didn't make an AP and they did make an entangle, therefore you died. Orc versus Undead has been slightly Orc favored for nearly 15 years. Where in the past the Blade Master... on the other side, yeah, I'm also not sure this is 100% the solution, because every race has uniqueness, right? And usually when the community tries to take the patch into their own hands, we tend to kill uniqueness. I see this in Age of Empires 4 as well, where we are communicating with the developers via a private Discord. Usually we look at things that are working well for a civ that is currently very strong, and then we delete it. For example, the Mongol Yam Aura network is something that gives movement speed to Mongol race in AoE 4. And it only gives movement speed if you're inside the range of a tower, with a really large range. And it also gives you a lingering aura effect of movement speed for the 30 seconds that you leave the tower range. So you're essentially fast, all of your units are faster than your opponent's units all the time, because 30 seconds is a long time, unless you stay out there for a long time. And that was nerfed to 20 and then to 10, and I think it's gone now. There's no more aura effect when you leave the radius. So while that did nerf and rein in Mongol aggression, it also made the race less unique, made the civ less unique. And I guess this also does it. Like right now, Elf is special because they can hide at night, they can see more at night, and they can heal more at night. Once you change this, then they can no longer see more at night, even though Elf is like the harass race in tier 1. So that's a big advantage. So I'm not 100% sure if deleting all the uniqueness everywhere is correct. Orc versus Undead has slightly favored Orc for nearly. It sounds like it's been like a linear favoring, but I'm pretty sure now it's either equal, or it's undead favored, or it's orc favored. Emotionally, I feel like it's undead favored actually. Though it's difficult to base that on losses against like X-Lord 120 and Happy because they're all higher rated than me. But I personally feel like it's a little undead favored because of Frost Armor and Curse. And like nukes, like how every fight that you have, they start with a nuke with 1 or 2 free kills. Even if you either you take the fight, you don't take it, they start with the kill and then the mana statue. On the other hand, when I play undead, and in fact this is shaped by my experiences, when I play undead, I lose to orc a lot. Headhunters have too much damage, Stomp does too much damage, wolves are too annoying. So I'm pretty sure if I was an undead player, I would think orc is having an advantage. So that's pretty interesting. I have that self-awareness. Let's look at his changes. Increase Headhunter gold cost, reduce Headhunter HP. Yeah, so this will affect orc versus human as well. This will affect every matchup actually, right? They're really small knobs that I'm actually uninterested to delve too deep into. I don't think these are design fixes, and I'm looking mostly at design fixes. So yeah, I think there's many knock-on effects of things like this, and they're either small or big because there's like a tipping point where something can get nuked easier by entangle or by coil or whatever with a couple of auto attacks. But I don't think that this is really what I'm looking for when it comes to making matchups more fun. Animal War training available in tier 2. So that's going to make Hawks better against Orc at tier 2, against Bat Riders and Wyverns, which they're already extremely good at. And it's going to help prep Knights and Griffins for tier 3 when they're playing against Undead. And it's also going to affect 4-on-4, of course. It's mostly like to save production time at tier 3, and it's to help Dragonhawk. So I just basically see this as a mostly generic human buff, but it is ungeneric in making human airplay better against orc airplay in tier 2. And I don't think that's a good thing because orc airplay is already extremely difficult to pull off against human, but would be a fun, and it's actually kind of an important possible playstyle. As it stands right now, you see it less than 1% of the time, and it has like less than 1% chance of working against human airplay as orc. So this will kill it more, because then Bat Riders can't kill Hawks anymore, and that's a very unfavorable change. Disagree. Mana cost of Impale. What? Oh. Disagree. I think Impale is very strong. Disagree. Arcane Tower I think is the second best tower in the game. I think it's already actually too good. I think all things that deal with mana in the game right now are too good. I think Brilliance Aura was too good, but it got nerfed. I think Obsidian Statue Generation is too good. Clarity is probably too good, but it's kind of important if you don't have mana generation from Statue and Brilliance and Moonwells. And I think Mana Burn and Siphon Mana are too good. And Spellbreaker Feedback, where they steal mana, is too good. So I would definitely not make it better. Spiked Carapace giving regen, I think that's alright. I don't hard disagree with it, though I don't think it's important. Carrion Swarm, damage go up and its damage cap go up. I think that's probably too good. I wouldn't do this. I think Sea Swarm is quite good. Base agility, 4 points of agility is actually insane. This is actually insane. And this isn't just going to affect Dreadlord first strats, like make that more common. Blademaster was almost murdered with -2 agility, which is why we're playing Farseer so much. It's because Blademaster got -2 agility. Like Blade legit feels extremely hard in most matchups now. You would never play Blades against human anymore. That used to be a thing. And it was actually quite fun, Blademaster style, but it's almost not possible because of -2. 4 agility is insane. Disagree. I think Undead Expoing is quite good already. Disagree. I disagree on this one and on this one. This one I could probably agree to. Siege Engines, not a super fun unit to deal with, to protect. against, but they are kind of food heavy already. We see very few siege engine tactics for the most part. Still, I feel like siege engines will work whether they have 700 or 640 health. So I don't super disagree with it, but I don't think it's super important. This one I can kind of agree to. I think spells last quite long. Serpent Ward, Sentry Ward. Fairy Fire used to last really long. It was nerfed a bit. The duration of channel time of possession. I think I disagree with that. I don't think you'll ever see possession work anymore when it takes that long. So yeah, I'm gonna disagree with that. Reduce Lich's Frost Nova slow duration. Reduce. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't even have to look at the numbers to know I agree with that. The slow from Frost Nova is insane. And Frost Armor too. I think Frost Armor has to be nerfed as well. Alright, units. Problematic units. Reduce gold cost for altar heroes. Oh, interesting. Why? There's a huge difference for second and third heroes between altar and tavern. Altar hero needs 55 seconds. Tavern is instant. Oh, okay. Okay. Which is a gigantic advantage. Hero at tavern. Yeah. Yeah, these are advantages, but it does cost 135 wood more already. Right? Doesn't it cost 135 wood more from the tavern? Or like 35 wood more? The game tries to compensate for this imbalance by having an increased lumber cost, but this is entirely not enough to properly... I think it is kind of enough. Yeah, I think it's enough. You can't say 35 is entirely not enough, but 25 is entirely enough to even it out. That's like saying 55 resource difference is enough, but 35 is entirely not enough, but 50 is. You know, it's or 60, which is, I mean, you're already over halfway there. I think this matters. Kodo's Devour ability, a limitation of only being able to devour 3 or less supply units. No, it'll be terrible. That means they can only eat rifles and archers. It's terrible. Do you know how long it takes to eat an abomination or bear? It gives vision. They're easily hunted. Kodos don't scale in armor. They don't get any upgrades, no attack upgrades, no armor upgrades. They'll always be unarmored, always have 0 or 1 armor, whatever they have. They are like a vision liability. There's a risk in picking up the unit. They can be freed. Also, massing kodos has very big diminishing returns. The first kodo gives you the chance to give damage aura to everyone, but the second kodo does not do that. So while one kodo eating 1 abomination is an extremely cost-efficient trade if you end up devouring the whole thing, dealing with 6 abominations and eating with 6 kodos, that's not a viable playstyle because kodos are slow, they don't buff each other, they are overcasted for what they do before you get to a battle where you want to eat. You can't go around the map creeping with 6 kodos, but the 6 abomination or the 6 bear guy can ignore the orc and go creep things way faster and more efficiently than a 6 kodo orc. It's like the same argument why you can't walk around with 12 bat riders against 3 chimera, because those 12 bats can't creep, but the 3 chimera are just murdering creeps. So even if bats and Kims traded cost evenly, like evenly in cost, those bats, well, you can try to kill bases with it, right? But sometimes it doesn't work. But those Kims are gonna like do everything for you for the rest of the game. So the kodo and the bats are like counter units, but they're really useless until they're being utilized for that purpose that they are designed for. Where the other units, the bear, he's rejuvenating, he's roaring, and so on. And then you could say that roar shouldn't be able to affect units that cost 4 food or more, or maybe like Disease Cloud from Abom should only be able to affect units that are 4 food or more. I think these are neither intuitive nor good changes. This is true. They made it tier 2 control magic. I actually think control magic is really a problematic upgrade. I think it has a healthy interaction with summonables for the most part, and here's why. It scales in cast with the summon's health. If you want to steal a level 2 wolf or a level 3 wolf, you have to pay a proportionate amount of mana. Sometimes the water elemental is so big that you can't steal it until you hurt it a bit. and then it will consume the entire mana pool of the breaker. And breaker can only be made with Archmage, because otherwise they're always out of mana. So I think it has a pretty healthy... And the second argument is, even if you steal a summon, the opponent can then kill the summon and get the experience for it. So there's a trade-off. They steal your summon, but they don't get the XP for killing your summon. Right? They stole it. Now you're killing it. So there's a double experience advantage to the robbed player, but the winner player that stole the summon now has a summon, right? So I think that's a healthy interaction. What I think is unhealthy is the way that Control Magic steals wards from the Witch Doctor. Sentry ward, stasis, and healing ward. And I think I've spoken about that before in my patch video, so I'll not go too deeply into it. But I think more needs to be done with Control Magic, where it is not such a hard counter to Doctors, basically to the point that Doctors don't work against human ever anymore. Spirit Walker damage increase? Yeah, I don't think it's too necessary nor important. I agree big time with this. And this one, I'm not sure. I think this can be healthy in some matchups, including Human Mirror. Maybe, yeah, Human Mirror. But this may not be good into Undead or Elf per se. Decrease Demon Hunter mana burn range, but buff Immolation. I think that's a pretty okay change. Like I said, I think mana burn is a little strong, and Immolation is weak as hell. Torrent Shift and Endurance, speed bonus, reduced. I think that's fair, probably. Though orcs do have this racial identity of hit and run, and it's going to be harder because of it. But I mean, this is a strong-ass spell, Endurance. So, I mean, I wouldn't be super against it, so long as everything else is balanced to keep the races fun and equally strong, right? Bears, weaker. I wonder at the reasoning. I can't judge it at face value without hearing his reasoning. Yeah, well, let's just put it this way. The starting mana, that was just stupid. I don't know where that came from. Someone that doesn't play the game. Someone at Blizzard that doesn't play the game, that gave the parting gift of a balance change. And that quits Blizzard by now. I think they came from StarCraft, and I think they do good work with patching in general, but they just didn't spend enough time with the game to really understand where this came from, why it would be good or why it would be bad. And they didn't stick around long enough, obviously, to figure out what happened with the change. And I think it's time to turn it back to not doing that. Just change this. I think that was a problem. Anti-magic shell, no longer blocking 300 but just 250. I think that's fair. It's very strong. But what's also interesting is, can we talk about what anti-magic shell does to armor type? Currently, anti-magic shell changes your armor type, if I'm not mistaken. So a grunt that has heavy armor and that takes double damage from Chimera, let's say instead of 50, it takes 100. Or let's say, be more realistic, instead of 90, it takes 180. I believe if you give him anti-magic shell on the grunt, he takes damage as if he's not heavy armor. So he's not taking 180 damage, but 90. And so AMS is actually very effective on statues and abominations against spells and magic attacks. Let me know in the comments if you're sure that I'm wrong, either here on Twitch or on YouTube, but I believe that's how it is. And that may make it seem more effective than it really should be. So if that can be fixed, then maybe this wouldn't be necessary. And that's if this is necessary at all. Reduce the duration of Disease Cloud. Yeah, they buffed it, right? Okay, so Disease Cloud used to be 1 damage per second for 120 seconds. And then they buffed it because it was useless, supposedly. It really wasn't, but, you know, Blizzard thought abominations aren't good, and this is how to help them. They buffed it to 2 damage per second for 90 seconds. This is very strong against human, because priests will waste all their mana on 2 HP heals, which is bad. So they have to turn off autocast, but it still means that they show up with 180 damage minus regen, 1.5 minutes later. That's quite strong. And I think that's fair, 75. I even think 60 seconds will be enough. 2 damage per second is quite good, and it's spread from a single abomination or meat wagon. Increase the gold cost of statues. Okay. Statues are quite likely the best unit in the entire game. I think that they are one of the best units, though you can't use them by themselves usually, right? Until your heroes are really high level. I think most people seem to agree that the mana regeneration for statues is too much. It's more than Brilliance level 2. I believe it's equal to Brilliance level 3, which humans almost never get. And they get it very, very early. And it's what makes... And it's arguable to say that a race that can spend mana to get guaranteed kills constantly has more use of a lot of mana, equal to Brilliance 3. They have more use of a lot of mana. I want to use the example of the ultimate ability of the Keeper of the Grove. Keeper of the Grove Tranquility is one of the few ultimates that is good and viable to be used outside of battle. Because healing outside of battle can be really good. You remove the chance of getting interrupted, and healing is good. Your units were hurt, now you're healing. You can use it mid-combat as well, and then it's also good. Now you compare that to Earthquake. Casting Earthquake in my own base has no value. Reincarnation isn't good until I die. Bladestorm isn't good until I hit something. And Big Bad Voodoo isn't good until I get hit. So all the Orc heroics are only good in combat or against bases, right? But Tranquility is always good. By that reckoning, Tranquility should cost enough mana or have a big enough cooldown that it becomes a conscious decision whether you're going to use Tranquility outside of combat. It becomes a trade-off. I want to use Tranquility now to heal up my half HP mountain giants, but I won't have it for the fight in 3 minutes because the cooldown is in 3 minutes. Right? The cooldown is 3 minutes, so I won't have it for a fight in 2 minutes, is what I mean. And then an ultimate like Earthquake, which is very situational and almost never used, like it's literally just not desirable often, that could have a short cooldown and you won't see it spammed. Why? I am exposing myself at your base. Not like that. You can interrupt it. It only does building damage, no unit damage. I am wasting mana that I will need to spend money for with Clarity Potion and Mana Potion to get back. There are no free mana mechanics for Orc. So if I'm using Earthquake all the time, that is a cost. So even if Earthquake had a cooldown of 45 seconds, I still wouldn't be spamming it every 45 seconds. Now you look at Tranquility, I'm going to spam that a lot because for some reason they dropped the cooldown to like, what is it, 45, 60 seconds? And this is one of the most useful spells in the game that can be used all the time inside and outside of combat. So I think that's a problem with Tranquility, and I think that spells that get used very situationally can have a shorter cooldown because you're probably not going to use them that often anyway. But at least you'll have the option to if it becomes useful. Increase the gold cost of statues. What about happy balance? Yeah, maybe I can go over that next time, Gigglegek. I think statue mana needs to be dropped. Item balance, okay. 1 evolution charges from 3 to 2. The reason I disagree with it is because you can do a surround with 1 hero and 3 illusions, and I think that's a fun mechanic that created a lot of good historical moments in Warcraft 3, and once there's 2, then you can't do it anymore. So I disagree with it on those charges. No pun intended. Reduce Sentry Ward vision range and make them grant 30 experience when killed. I think there's something else you could do with Sentry Wards from items, and I don't know if this is a good idea or not, but let's at least talk about it. What if Sentry Ward was visible to your opponent, but untouchable until revealed? You could see something, a smudge, you know where it is, but you have to reveal it to deal with it. It would still be good, but your opponent wouldn't have to guess where it is. Kind of like the Observer. Yeah, actually, there's precedent. The Observer in StarCraft 1 and 2 has a cloaked outline. It does become a vision skill check that I think is not really a positive. players come in many sizes and talents and so on, and adding a skill check of whether you can see the blur on your monitor settings with your quality of eyesight and so on, I'm not sure that's 100% a good thing. I think visibility is important. Maybe you make it very obvious that there is a sentry ward. Not a bit of a blur, but very obvious, but you must reveal it to kill it. Surely the problem with sentry ward is just that it lasts so long? Is it? It doesn't last that long anymore, 5 minutes. I mean, it's pretty long, yeah. As a low vision player, it feels unfair. Yeah, I think it would. I think I would vote sooner for a very obvious sentry ward rather than a small blur because of the vision argument. The item used to last 10 minutes, now it's 3 or 5. Sentry ward from Witch Doctor still takes 10 minutes. Five minutes, so 2 games for me. 3 minutes. The item, okay. I think I like my idea more than this, but yeah, okay, let's move on. I don't have a full definitive. Circlet is 2 to the main attribute, 1 to the secondary. Reduce gold cost. So it's gonna be 2-1-1, 1-2-1, or 1-1-2. Make it toggleable, or I don't think this is terrible. I think Circlet is quite good. Claws +4, -1 again. I think it's fair in terms of like dropping Circlet and Claws. I think it's fair in terms of balance. I think it's also boring. At the end of the day, I find it a hard argument because I like the excitement of finding a Circlet or a Claws because they're better than Ring and Gloves. I like that. And I will like it less, the new items. I hate it when my opponent finds it. But in the end, Warcraft has RNG. Hate it or love it, it has RNG. Everything is not always going to have the same value. So I actually don't have a definitive decision whether I want this to happen or not. I can see it from the balance perspective, but what about the fun perspective? Uncle of Reincarnation, more HP, like, whatever, I guess. It's really whatever. Whatever. I don't think these changes are that important. Ideas to improve and enrich the meta. Okay. Increase burning oil full damage. Yeah, I think burning oil, demolisher damage buff. I don't think anyone will be against that because right now it's pretty trash. Farseer and attribute buff. Gives him intelligence for a few seconds. I don't think that's the way forward, but I do think something can be done with Farsight. Great Hole build faster. This is gonna make Orc better against Human for the most part, since that's the most common situation where we try to do a tier 2 expansion. Tier 2 expos in the current meta are kind of suicide against Undead because they'll hit a timing that will murder you. So it's pretty irrelevant. It will also help against Elf. Helping against Elf is a good thing about the current balance strength of Orc Elf, but it's a bad thing for against Human because Orc Human is in a good spot or maybe Orc favored. So this would help Orc in that sense. Ignoring all the other changes, this is both good and bad. But I'm not super against it. I think it could be good. Maybe 5 or 10 seconds instead. I'll go over Lawliet's changes soon, Evocar. I want to go over my own first. Rework Witch Doctor, nerf Sentry Ward's duration, sight range, and give XP. So he wants to nerf them, right? But like almost nobody's going Doctors. And when you go Doctors against Human, they can punish you by stealing all of them with Control Magic. Heal Ward, make that the earlier ability at tier 2, right? The Adept ability, reducing the mana cost. Okay, that's pretty imbalanced. It's really easy to make one Doctor, get the Adept upgrade, and then have Healing Ward. I think this is way too good. I mean, as much as an Orc, I would love it. This is insane. Courageous for him to suggest it, though. I mean, let's not hate on him for having an idea. I think that's good. I love that Remo did this, but I do disagree with it. Making stasis traps the master ability for Witch Doctors, giving it a new aura effect. Mana regen. Okay. So the thing about this, right, it makes it good out of combat, just like Heal Ward and Sentry already are. That's going to make the Doctor an amazing turtling unit. And it won't even matter if humans can steal any of these things, because you've already gotten so much value out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and whatever this says doesn't matter. I think this is too strong, so probably not a good idea. Probably. Unless you want every race to have mana regen, because Orc is the only one that doesn't have it right now. Shaman Lightning Shield grant armor. I think that's pretty cool. Does Lightning Shield need a buff? We mostly only see it against tier 1 elf and against human peasants and footies. Outside of those, you don't see it that much. How is Night Elf mana regen? Moonwells. It's not a very favorable mana exchange, but used well, you will gain anywhere from 300 to 1,000 mana from Moonwells over the course of a game. That's quite a lot. That would cost you anywhere from 210 to 700 gold as Orc. It's not free, but it is a mana dump that can be given just because you follow the build order of making Moonwells. Is Lightning Shield not used against rifle builds anymore? I suppose it is, yeah. Lightning Shield on an enemy would give them armor too. Yeah, that might be a problem. Okay, this... I'm not super against it, nor super for it. Mirror Image already became more viable. Mostly the blade is too vulnerable and low damage against most meta builds right now. Like against Undead with Frost Armor and Curse and nuking him, I don't think Mirror Image is going to help there at all, even if it's cheaper. And against Night Elf, Mirror Image is a gimmick to break out of Entangle, Acid Bomb, and to scout. And it will help there. Yeah, I guess it will mostly affect Orc versus Elf, and that's probably a good thing right now. But really, what I would hope is that we can get Orc Elf to a position where both at least have two viable builds. I think Keeper is the biggest problem for Orc Elf. What Keeper can do with Entangle. And I don't think this document addresses Keeper's, let's say, oppressiveness against Orc. I don't think Ultravision is enough to deal with it. But maybe it is. Easier to dodge, right? To try to evade them. But it's still risky. If you get found by Keeper, then you will start losing Headhunters or Grunts, whatever they are. Reduce Blade Master's Bladestorm mana. I think reducing it to 150 is probably good. 125 feels a little light. 200 feels a lot. It's not actually that good, Bladestorm. But 150 feels alright. Pulverize. Give the Tauren Pulverize the additional effect of increasing Tauren's movement speed from 270 to 300. So this, if you take the Endurance nerf, I'm not exactly sure where that leaves them. It will probably still be a net buff. They kind of need it, so maybe it's not terrible. Maybe it's good. Increase Paladin movement speed. He becomes better as a first hero. I don't think this is... yeah. This is very fast, isn't it? Isn't this like Blade and Demon? That seems pretty crazy. It sounds a little toxic against Undead, and then that's not even accounting for boots of speed yet. It doesn't feel right. Like for me, Paladin is a slower hero. And so is Dreadlord and Pitlord and Cryptlord. And I think they all got made a bit faster before in a previous patch. It doesn't really feel correct to me. So I'm going to disagree with that one. Give Footman a new tier 2 upgrade. Broaden shields. 100 casts. 70 seconds. Defend also protects against ranged normal damage. Wait, what's ranged normal damage? Oh, Spellbreakers. Is there anyone else that has ranged normal damage? No, right? Spellbreakers? Human Mirror has been suffering from mass Spellbreaker war for more than a decade. Magic Immune units. Oh, Huntress. Yeah. The Magic Immune units are so strong and utterly oppressive in this matchup that they snuff out almost all strategic variety. Yeah, but I think it's because feedback and control magic and spell steal are so good. I like to remind people of why anti-magic is so good in Frozen Throne. It's because of the armor and damage graph, the armor and damage relation, armor type and damage type relation in Reign of Chaos was whack. It was whack. Shamans and doctors did 15 piercing damage, which would mean they would murder almost everything. As did talents, as did banshees and necromancers, as did sorceresses and priests. This was early Reign of Chaos. Current ROC rule set doesn't even have that piercing anymore. But Reign of Chaos took like a year. The meta of Reign of Chaos took a year before TFT came out. And in that year, we learned that there's a couple of things you do. You tower creep, and you spam casters. And if you could fast expand, you did. That was kind of the meta back then. And mass casters was so oppressive that when TFT was being designed, it was done in mind of having a strong counter to magic users. So they designed the Fairy Dragon. So they designed the Spellbreaker, the Arcane Tower, the Spirit Walker. All the new additions, the Devourer, right, the Destroyer, all the new additions were all about anti-magic. They took away the Wand of Negation out of the Goblin Shop, and they made everyone have insanely good anti-magic. And the Spellbreaker is maybe one of the biggest offenders of it, in that he almost makes magic unviable. You can't cast Rejuvenation against breakers in battle anymore. And there's 0 skill required for the human to stop you from using Rejuve. You can't use Doctors, ever. You can never, ever use Bloodlust against a human. You cannot use Curse. You cannot use Fairy Fire, ever, against breakers. They immediately shut all that down. Then they stop summons, they stop totems, and they sap your mana when they attack. And then they are medium armor, normal attack damage range. And I don't think it's fantastic. I feel like breakers kind of need a rework, and I don't think defend footmen, broaden shields is necessarily a thing. Ignoring needing to change breakers, which I think there is a need to make the game more fun. Ignoring that, I would just say target something in Human Mirror that that makes Night Mortar the better meta in Human Mirror than breakers. I don't know what it is, but I think we can all agree that Night Mortar Human Mirror is way more fun to watch than Breaker Mirror. Can we get the effing game started? No, I think I'm just going to continue doing this thing. Yeah, I think I'll just continue where I was at. So, reduce blacksmith lumber cost. Yeah, not terrible per se. Not terrible per se. It will make the Paladin rifles more better. Though, Pala rifle, let's see. Thorzane. Sadly, Thorzane kind of re-retired. But Thorzane did something very special. It's difficult to actually overstate it. Thorzane came out of retirement during Happy's domination period in the last 4 years and continually took Happy to the brink to 2-3 scores in best of 5s. Maybe not as consistently, because Thorzane and most humans are not as consistent as Happy, but he was able to continually bring Happy to the brink in a best of 5 with the Paladin rifle strategy, as it currently is. And no other human has been able to do that. Not one. But he was able to do it, and he's a genius. He's very smart. He's humble, and he has the micro for it. But while being a full-time doctor, yes. If he can do it, it can be done. It only needs one Happy to have a Happy. It only needs one Thorzane to have a Thorzane. But he quit and Happy did not. Right? But he's a doctor now. So, like, is he really losing at life? So the thing is, it can be done. He's just not doing it anymore. So it's very probable that Paladin rifle is not weak against undead, at least. And undead human is one of the most imbalanced matchups in the game. But Pala rifle could be a solution. And Sok and Chimiko have very good micro, but they're not doing it because they don't believe in it. But Thorzane believed and he did it. Would Happy in time learn to dominate that tactic and be 3-0 against it constantly. Quite possible too, actually, because it was a short period of time. Stock tried last week, it was super close. Oh, interesting, Neo. That's interesting. Chimiko's trying a lot on ladder. That's interesting. But now there's Lich Expo meta. Yeah, and Paladin Rifle is not good against Undead Fast Expand. And Undead Fast Expand, as we're learning more, because here's another thing about Happy, right? Happy is insanely stubborn. Other Undeads that don't have his micro and timing sense, they were forced to strategize. Undeads like Sight, who are not as good micro-wise, but they use then instead, out of a need, they use their creativity and their more open-mindedness, because they think more flexibly than Happy, to come up with strategies that worked for them. Against, you know, like a Cryptlord Expand, Dreadlord Expand, Lich Expand, DK Expand, Craft from France, right? As well. Oh, there's Frenchies, so creative. Craft, a lot of different strategies. Insuperable. French Canada. Jeez, Frenchies are so creative. They all come up with strategies where they roll the die for an Altar of Darkness hero. Oh, Lich. I was like, oh, Dreadlord. Oh, Death Knight. And then they fast expand with it, and that's doing very well for them against a number of races. And when Happy finally started doing that took him years to adopt the lesser undead tactics, he was able to, guess what, make it work. He was just inflexible. And that makes Happy even more dangerous. You take the creativity of the other undeads, and then you add the execution of him. I myself have also been forced to strategize because I felt like I cannot get the micro to a good enough point where I can beat certain things, even if I know technically they're beatable. So I am also a creative player out of a need and out of an ability to do so. And so I don't know if this is necessary. And I disagree with this one. And this one is interesting. Yeah, boys! All right, yeah. Just give it an ability to explode. But you have to click it 15 times in a row. Damn, Remo. I think by this time, Remo was deep in his cups already. Like, even he was getting a bit bored. He's like, page 10? He's like, fuck it. Like, I don't think they're actually gonna read this. Jesus. Buff the Blood Mage by reducing Flame Strike mana. What? 5 mana? You're crazy! It's just getting crazier. Like, this was 9 out of 10 on the craziness, but this is a 10 out of 10. Making it so that banished allies are not affected by the movement speed slow, decrease Phoenix HP degeneration from -25. I don't think Blood Mage needs any buff, man. Siphon mana is the most broken thing in the game. And the only reason it doesn't get used a lot is because Blood Mage is a bad starter hero, because he doesn't have summons, doesn't have heal, doesn't have a stun. All those things that are really good at controlling the early game. But Blood Mage is broken as heck. Has anyone ever even lost from Phoenix Degeneration? Yeah, only utter degenerates have. Bad Diego. So, increase the Demon Hunter's immolation damage. I think that's 5 mana reduction. Yeah, I think that's fine as well. Yeah, we read this before a bit, right? I think these are fine. Rework and buff Priestess of the Moon by increasing her nighttime vision from 800 to 9. Oh my god! Decrease the mana cost of Searing Arrow. Increase the damage per wave of Starfall. Yeah, I mean, I think she's a boring hero. He's trying to make her less boring. And Owl healing aura. No, I think this is best just request edit access. Delete. I think this part we can just delete this. Rework the Druid of the Talon by increasing his damage by 1. Reduce Cyclone mana increase. Remove the vision, true sight aspect of Fairy Fire. Instead make affected targets. Wow. I think this is pretty creative, but I don't have any strong agreement sentiment bubbling up from inside. Buff the Keeper of the Grove's Thorns aura to do more. I'm gonna go ahead and disagree with that. Melee is already pretty weak, and I think everyone knows it. I think he would probably even admit that we're in a ranged meta, so I don't think making melee weaker is a good thing. So I'm gonna disagree with this one. How do I know if I use my Prime sub on Grubby? You can check it in your you can go to your account and check your subscriptions page. It says everyone you're sub to and how, and when it becomes available again, your Prime. Change the Death Knight's ultimate raise dead by making the summon units not be invulnerable, but giving them 40 armor. 40 armor? So it basically heavily punishes attack move people, right? So anyone that attack moves ends up attacking irrelevant targets that literally cannot die. And it also forces units to remain and fight the dead, because right now units will auto run from invulnerable targets if there are no other enemies nearby. So that's going to be a very frustrating mechanic, mostly for newbies, but it also kind of feels like Mountain Giant Taunt. And it would make them unsummonable as well by this spell. I don't think this is good. I like the uniqueness that it currently has. Like this we check Prime. Thank you, Yulit24. I appreciate that. And make them grant XP when killed. I think I disagree with this one. Dreadlord buff by, yeah, we saw this before. Cannibalize gold cost reduction and research time. I think this is fine. But I also don't think it's necessary. I don't think 75-30 is that bad. Add a single target dispel to the Necromancer's Unholy Frenzy. It will be applied right before the Unholy. No, I don't think you should tether a third effect to what it does, because you wouldn't be able to disassociate the two if you don't want to use both. I think that's also my problem with Lightning Shield adding an armor. Adding negative and positive things to one thing and being unable to uncouple them, I don't think it's a good thing. Give the Gargoyle prioritize abilities to different hotkeys. Yeah, that's a good thing. I agree with this. Graveyard build time -5. Corpse spawn interval. I think that's fine. I don't see any reasoning, so I'm not sure why. Unless Undead was weak. Then you could like target this, or you could literally target anything else, right? It's the same with Necropolis and Goldmine changes. He suggested buffs for Undead. They are buffs to a race that I think doesn't need it. But even if it did, it's very immaterial to me whether it would be the Graveyard or the Crypt or the Necropolis or the Goldmine or the Slaughterhouse. I think they're little minutiae that aren't that important in the grand scheme of things for matchups. When you get Mana Shield, also get Mana Regen. So Naga Sea Witch is like top 3 Tavern hero, so I don't think she needs buffs. I do think Mana Shield is weak, but I think you should only buff it if you nerf Frost Arrow and Fork Lightning. If you take a hero that is currently top 3 out of 8 in the Tavern, and you buff her least used ability, that's Blizzard 2018 thinking. That's how we got the Keeper meta. Because they said, Keeper doesn't get used that much, especially as a first hero. Let's give it 12 buffs. Huntress doesn't get used that much. 4 buffs. Moonwells, buff. Archer, buff. Glaive Thrower, buff. It's like, yeah, of course, suddenly you have a Keeper, Huntress, Archer, Glaive Thrower, Moonwell meta, which is what we had. And I don't think you want to do that just because it doesn't get used much. You buff a small thing on something that's weak, that's fine. If you take something that's strong, that has a weak thing, buff it and nerf something else. Blizzard makes the same mistakes in HOTS oftentimes. Look, you got heroes that get played 90% of the time. You got heroes that get played 3% of the time. Which one do they balance? The 90% of the time, because they feel like that's a worthwhile expenditure of their time. They're going to look at the 90% hero. They're going to forget about the 3% heroes forever. Okay? They're going to look at they're like 3% of the time it gets played. Well, nobody cares about this hero. We're not going to waste time on it. So they look at the 90% of the time hero. And then they're going to look at things that don't get used that much. And then they buff those things. But like that hero is very popular. But oh, guess what? It also has a 54% win rate. So like, why are you buffing the ability that never gets used? Nerf something else. In fact, nerf 2 other things because they're actually 90% popularity, 54% win rate. Nerf 2 things and buff the thing you want to buff. So that's the problem I see with this one. Increase Beastmaster strength gain, intelligence gain. So he will like level up better, right? But I disagree with that. I think Beastmaster is a top 5 hero in the Tavern. I know we're getting to the lower list. I think Firelord is probably bottom 8 out of 8. And he's cheesy, so anything that would make him like I mean, it's fine, I guess, to have like one cheesy hero. I don't think that's a huge problem. But if I were to change anything, I would like give him some late game power. Soulburn gets a new bonus effect. The usage of the ability applies an AoE dispel. Yeah, I disagree with multiple effects, especially like this. I mean, technically Soulburn already has a multiple effect. It reduces someone's damage, and they can't cast spells, and they take damage. But I don't know where the fascination with Summon Dispel comes from, tethered onto the Necromancer ability and on this one. I think if you want to Dispel, go get Dispel from the usual sources. Add a movement speed slow effect to the Dark Ranger's life drain ability. I think this is too much, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I think like 10, 20, 30 would be a pretty good idea. I like this idea. I agree with this. Chemical Rage, longer duration. I disagree. Give Dust of Appearance to all shops. It seems fair, but it's also symmetric. And it would be a buff to human against Night Elf. And I don't think they need it. It kind of makes sense. You guys agree with it? Let's see. Human would more easily kill archers on their expansion without having to make a trip to the shop. Humans would never have a problem with Fiend Burrow anymore. Very easy to get dust. I wouldn't get punished anymore for forgetting dust on my Farseer when I still have time at the shop. When I play against undead who goes burrow, I could just get it at my shop. I think I disagree with this. It's not that hard to go to the shop, just do it. The question is, why do elf and undead shops do have it? I think it's because undead and elf workers were seen as more harassable, so they need to be able to deal with invisible threats, like the Blade Master harass. And I guess human militia are kind of harassable as well, so you would think it makes sense to give it to them. I don't think orcs should get it, for sure, because orc peons are not that harassable by invisible things. And although human peasants are harassable, they can do the full wall off, and that is kind of like an iconic weakness for them, while at the same time they're really good at fast expanding. So it feels like a good weakness. So I would disagree with this one. Change Cluster Rocket ability type and damage type from magic to universal, so Tinker would have a new role as he would be the only hero in the game with an ability that works against magic immunes. I think I disagree. Okay, cool. Well, this was a really interesting document, and hope you enjoyed looking through this as much as I did and hearing my thoughts on it. If you liked it, make sure to leave a comment and give a like and subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. If you made it this far, you probably should, right? All right, see ya.